Hiya, Bubby. Welcome to Shanghai. My name is Duke, and this is kind of a mini grading video. I'm not doing a full grading video on these books, but I just noticed something that, I know it's there. I see it all the time, but it just occurred to me as something to point out because I don't often grade the newer books. This is the Mark Spector Moon Knight series from the early 90s. And here we've got Marvel Premiere number 48 from the 70s. And you look at both of these books and you might say, well, they look comparable. Probably the newer book is in better condition, but that's actually not the case. And I have made the case many times in the past on my Twitter account and Instagram and other places. I don't know about so much here on YouTube, but I'm going to do that now. So the thing is, I don't really understand why the newer books sell for so much less than the older books. Well, you may say, well, they're newer, they're less collectible. And I think really that's just evidence of people. They don't really collect to read the damn things. But they also don't collect with true scarcity and condition in mind. You get certain bits of conventional wisdom that kind of fix themselves into the marketplace, and it's hard to shake. Just like, I have spoken before about things like the Captain Universe issue of Micronauts number 8. Captain Universe never really became a thing, so why is that still such a high dollar copy compared to, its cohorts on either side of issue number 8? But here's the thing. So the newer books, they exist in the marketplace at between 2 to 5 times less than these books. These books had circulations in the 150, 250,000 copy range, whereas here you had circulations in the 60, 70,000 copies, and nowadays most titles run about 30,000 copies. So if you're trying to complete a run of Mark Spector Moon Knight, it's going to be a lot harder to do that than if you're trying to complete a run of Marvel Premiere. That it's just harder to find, but it's also harder to find them in high grade. And here's the thing I wanted to point out, and I don't have the tripod set up. It just occurred to me all of a sudden to do this. Kind of spur of the moment. So I'm just holding my phone here. I'm kind of doing this a one-armed bandit kind of thing. But here's what you get on a lot of books of this era. Because you look at this book and you just look at the cover and you're like, okay, well, hey, that's a 9.4. Maybe it's a 9.2. I don't know. But if you see here, and I hope I can point this out to you. If you look, a lot of newer books, right on the crease of the spine, you get this color flaking. And I hope you can see this. You see that white line that runs all the way down the length of the spine? We'll go past my hand there and try and keep it in focus. But you've got that focus, there we go. You've got that white line. That affects the grade. This book is I'm only going to grade this at, I haven't settled yet, but maybe an 8. Might even be a 7.5. That's kind of, in a grading sense, that's a big deal. That white line that runs right straight down the spine, and it's in a lot of books, I might even say most all books of this era. You see it here. You've got that color flake. And it's not just in books. Try and focus. Come on. My phone is wicked old. This is like an iPhone 7. See that? Can you see that? And so again, these books are only going to be 7.5, 8. And it's not just because these are black covers. And most any color is going to do that. Newer books from the 90s and newer, they get that flake along the spine. And I don't know why, what changed in the printing process. I know that books of this era, they printed at the Sparta Press in, I think Sparta was in Illinois. And by this point, I think most of the printing had moved to Quebec, the Quebecois printing press. I don't know 100% exact. But, you know, I've said before that in terms of storytelling, in writing, in art, in order to bring back the casual reader, which is what the industry needs to survive, not the aging hardcore fanboys that are dying out, but just regular, you know, run-of-the-mill readers who might pick up a copy here or there, or you know, an issue now and again, or maybe we'll only buy comics from, you know, age of like, you know, 10 to 15 or so, 8 to 12, somewhere in there, what used to be considered the prime comic book reading demographic. Not only do we need to go back to the future or forward into the past to be more accurate, not only do we need to do that in terms of story and art, but also in terms of printing. And in my videos, you may have heard me occasionally bitch about the coloring and how coloring in modern comics is too heavy, too dark, too many Photoshop techniques and graduations of color that detract. Whereas I like, and maybe that's partly, you know, because it's what I grew up with, but I like the kind of, well, there's an ad, but I like the flat, you know, coloring, the kind of flat, bright coloring of the comics of the you know, 70s, 60s, whatever. But the other thing too is the printing technology, and again, rather it was the newsprint rather than the higher grade of paper, rather it was the lower thickness of the cover stock as opposed to this high thickness. And you've heard me complain too in different grading videos about how modern comics, you can barely touch them. The ink is so thick, you can barely touch them without getting fingerprints in them. I mean, you never had that problem with these books. But the other thing is that these books were more supple. They took more handling, more, you know, they could resist being read a little more. I mean, that's one reason why you don't want to read a new comic book, not just because they suck, but just because, I mean, you can't hardly open a comic book these days. And again, going back to the 90s, you can hardly open the book without doing some damage to it. Whereas here, and again, I'll grant you this is, you know, kind of this is white. You know, there's no color there, so it's going to show up harder. But even so, you can see that cover, you know, it's kind of rounded around the saddle stitch here, the staples. You know, it's less pressed down, so the color doesn't flake. And so in books of this era, that spine will stay nice, you know, if the thing is treated with any kind of care at all. Whereas with a lot of newer books, it's actually much harder to get them in high grade because, again, if somebody's grading accurately, they're going to take into account the color flake that you get all down the length of the spine. So anyway, that's what I wanted to point out. Be careful with newer comic books. Make sure they're graded accurately. Look at the spine and see if you've got that color break, because that does infect the grade. Because over time, once the oxidation gets in there under the color where the color has broken along that spine, that's going to age that area. It's going to get more brittle faster than something like this. So again, just be careful with your newer books. Make sure they're graded accurately, whether you are buying or selling, and make sure you don't just look at the cover, but take into account that spine. Look carefully, and if you've got that line down the edge, that is something you should account for. And like I said, not only are these books from the 70s in more plentiful supply, it's easier to complete a run of Marvel Premiere than Mark Spector Moon Knight. They're also generally easier to find in high grade. I mean, you'll get a variation. You'll get a lot more lower grade copies of these because these were read by people who had no inclination to save them forever. They were treated as a disposable consumer good. Whereas these were mostly, if they were read at all, stuck right in a bag and board. So you will get, you know, in the aggregate, you'll find this in higher grade more often, but you will find more high grade copies of this, more 9.2s, 9.4s, 9.8s than you will of this, if this is graded accurately, if people are taking into account the spine. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. I meant to say it in about a 2-minute video and it took 10, but that's me. So until next time, goodbye, good luck, and let's pop in Superman here to say, please, be good to each other.